I have experiences. We all have experiences to share and talk to other people about and with, and there's value there, right? Because no matter how many times you hear something, it could take the 100th time, doesn't matter who says it. It could take that 100th or 1,000th time for you to hear it, for it to just click, for it to just click in your head. And that sense of peace and clarity, realization.
Well, hey, everyone, this is James, your Chief Culture Officer, trainer, and host of this podcast, which is called Lead Thru Values. Now, you have an opportunity to meet somebody that I think is just an exceptional person, and you're going to love his energy and his enthusiasm. And the name of my guest today is Mitchell Dean Harris. And so Mitchell and I actually connected on LinkedIn probably a year or so ago, certainly within the last several months. I kept seeing his posts. They're very inspiring. And, that's what I want in my newsfeed. And so I'm really excited to have a chance to talk with him today about his positivity, about learning, about growth, and just like taking advantage of opportunities that come your way. So on that note, I get really fired up when I get to talk about human behavior and human performance, because each of you have magnificent talents to bring into the world. And those gifts are all around like these four areas this is how I work with my clients, right? Four areas in which people are gifted: how you build relationships with others, how you approach your work, how you communicate, the way you prefer to be communicated with, and the way you think and make decisions. But here's the thing. Sometimes we misuse those gifts, and other times people misinterpret or misunderstand those gifts. And when that happens, teams aren't capitalizing on the capabilities that are there. So that's why I built my business around giving clients a competitive advantage by understanding those magnificent talents that they have within their teams throughout their company. And we use that to drive performance excellence. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that kind of training for your organization, which can be done in person or virtual, by the way, here's what you can do. I think the best way is I'd love to have a conversation with you. So pick up the phone and give me a call. My phone number is 319-929-2604. That rings me direct. And I'm not going to do a pitch or any kind of pressure to get you to buy something. That's not what this is. This is about starting a conversation that might lead to us working together that could change the future of your business. Now, if that's the case, I really do hope to hear from you. And you can learn about that training or any of those trainings by going to my website, which is jamesmayhew.com. So Mitchell, man, it's back to you now. You're in the hot seat here. I am excited to meet or to have our listeners meet you. And I'm going to learn something. I know every time that I have met with you, we just talked, we've had conversations 4 or 5 different times. And there is a mutual thing. I gain stuff from you. I hope you know that. But set us up here. Tell us a little bit about you and your career journey, like whatever you want to share.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I love your intro. Your intro is insane. If you were just talking about your intro alone, the values that come through are just so it's amazing. This is why I love listening to you. Your podcast is amazing. Just talking to you every time is amazing. Having connected with you, you mentioned that my newsfeed was filled with positivity and something that you connected with. Man, yours was like, I see it. I'm just like, there it is. Like, that's what I need to follow. I need to fill my newsfeed with stuff like that. So I love it. I love it.
High five, man.
Thank you. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. And so my journey is that everyone has their journey, and people have their conceptions that society places on us, that this is what you're supposed to do. This is what we expect of you. And sometimes we can dictate that, and other times life dictates that for us. And I originally thought I was going to be in nonprofit my whole life, and I started out there and did about 5 years. And a bunch of that was volunteer, and then I did full year employed, and things change. Doors open. I did a shift, then worked for New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene for about 3 years. And that was amazing. I was meant to be there for that amount of time. I thought I was going to be there longer, but again, things happened. COVID happened, and things shift. We have to pivot, be open-minded, see what doors there are. Sometimes we have to open the doors ourselves and create, you have to be willing to ask the question, which is a challenge in itself. A lot of people, the power of asking a simple question, a lot of people shy from it. But it's important. It's important. And anyway, so I did that for about 3 years, and then I found myself at this incredible company, and that I'm so grateful to be at. But that isn't the focus of the conversation. But I'm so grateful to be working for a company called JustWorks. And so here we are, and so grateful to be here. My first podcast ever with the one, the only James Mayhew. Here we go. Let's go.
I just need to put you on.
Fired up. I'm sorry. All right, here we go. I had to share that.
I just need to put you on retainer and have you go and introduce me all the time at places. That's awesome.
I'd love it, man.
Boost my confidence like that.
Oh, hey, we can record something later, and I'll send it to you.
So we were talking.
That's what it's about. I'm sorry, real quick. That's what it's about, though. Mindset, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to talk more about that. But what do you do every day? What messages are you putting in your mind? What do you see? What content are you absorbing? So we're going to get into that. I'm sure, because we always do.
Well, let's do it right now. Let's tear that Band-Aid right off. Let's talk about mindset, because here's the thing. Mindset guides your behaviors, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like, I always say this: values drive your behaviors or your actions, and then those actions determine the results. 100% believe that. But alongside those values, if we're stressed, if we're overwhelmed, if we're in a toxic environment, it's really tough to live values out. It really is. So, right. So like, mindset's got to be a driver behind that.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, our mental well-being, mental and physical well-being, if that's not in check, it's compared to a cup. If your cup is full, you're able to give to others, right? But if you're stressed, you're overworked, you're not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, then that cup has less and less. And if you have nothing left to give, then where is the value and where is the appreciation in the day-to-day? So exactly, you really need to, the mindset, right? It leads it. All these things we have to create our days. We get the routines of our life get set for a long amount of time, and then every once in a while we get to wake up like, okay, I need to change this routine in my life a little bit. And a lot of that is the things we consume, actual food and substance, as well as material knowledge and stuff like that. The positivity has to outweigh the negativity. What are you feeding your mind?
Oh my gosh. Well, so I'll date myself, going back into the 80s when the expression garbage in, garbage out, maybe that was the early 90s, came to be, and how precise that is. If we just have a mindset of garbage in, or we're just collect garbage in, that's going to impact the mindset. We're going to not be at our best self. It's like I said at the beginning, magnificent talents. Each person has it. And the unfortunate truth is that some people's mindset restricts those talents from coming into the world, right? They maybe never in their life really tap into what's there.
And let's just talk about that just for a moment.
Yeah.
And that's at no fault of their own, because the way that, right? Is that where you're going
with that? I would agree with that most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. No fault of their own at first. We do have a say in our lives, what we contribute, and we do have some direction, a dictation towards that direction. But at the same time, it's important to recognize and understand and realize, there are obstacles in today's society that are placed in front of us that we need to overcome. And so that's important. Recognize that. And so people, because we have so much pressure that we put on ourselves, that society puts on us, that sometimes we need to remember, what? By design, that's how society is. But after you recognize that, just like anything negative that happens in your life, it's important to recognize it, feel it for the healthy amount of time, but then move on, right?
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to share that for those who aren't tapping into their talents, it's not that you haven't tapped in yet and you never will. It's that you absolutely can, and let's start today.
Les Brown, one of my favorite speakers to listen to in the whole world, you've heard him, right?
I was fortunate. My wife took me to see him for my birthday years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he spoke at an event in New Jersey. So I got to not meet him, but see him on the stage. I love his laugh is
His
epic.
laugh.
Oh my
Yes.
God, you gotta,
It's
oh, I love it.
infectious.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Well, there's a speech that he gave, and it was at a Manpower conference, and I don't know how many years ago it was, and I believe it was in that one because I've listened to a number of his things, where he said the richest place in the world isn't the diamond mines in Africa or the oil fields in the Middle East or in certain parts of the world. He said the richest place in the world is a cemetery.
Cemetery.
And
yep.
man, and
I
it
mouthed
punches
grave.
you
If you
right.
go back a few seconds ago, you'll see I mouthed the grave or cemetery.
And that's the thing, is because that's where dreams,
That hits you right
unfulfilled
here,
things have
right in the
died.
heart.
It does.
Yeah.
It'll make you, when you hear that, and if
Yeah.
you've been wrestling or you've been holding something back, and there's that thing that's in your heart, and I believe it's a vision that's divinely inspired often, right? Whether you want to buy into that or not, that's my opinion of it, is that if you don't bring that into the world, and it ends up going with you, because either die before, like, nobody expects to wake up and this is going to be my last day on earth, right? That's just, most people don't have that.
Right.
But when he said the richest place in the world is cemeteries, because that's where books that were never written, cures that were never discovered, music that was never composed, like inventions, solutions that never got brought to the world because somebody didn't have an opportunity to step into those talents. What an impactful statement, right? And it's, sometimes I think we need to be smacked in the face with something that brutally honest to get us to go, okay, I'm not going to settle for just okay anymore. Like, we have one life. There's no undo button anywhere involved in it. And we need to have a sense of urgency about bringing our gifts to the world. And I think, like, that's what I get when I see you, and I see like your motivation. I see the ambition, the drive that you have, or people like you, Mitchell. Like, that's amazing to me. And I want to first celebrate it. And then the next thing is like, how can I help you get there? I want to know that.
So I'm writing celebrate it. There's so much with that, but I also want to say, let's be real. We're being real this whole time, but let's get vulnerable. I'm going to get a little vulnerable here.
All right.
When it comes to self-doubt, we all have self-doubt. When it comes to
Absolutely.
that negative self-talk, we all have that. But how we let that dictate our lives. And when I was younger, that dictated my life a lot. It prevented me from doing things and enjoying and appreciating the moment because of that self-doubt, that negative self-talk and anxiety in different forms. And when you asked me to speak with you, I was like, I'd love to, but the fear, right? And in the past, I'd be with that fear and sit with that fear and just stay there. Over time, things like feel the fear, but do it anyway. False evidence appearing real, things like that form.
Yes.
And the more, because you said smack in the face, right? And when you said that, we're talking about the cemetery living, or, people living their lives, that's where things of value and great worth get buried. It made me think, so how do you change this mindset? How do you change your attributes, right? So smack in the face. So just like things like the negativity and anxiety or negative self-talk smacks you in the face all the time, how do you change that? So when you asked me to speak with you, I'm like, who am I? Like, why should I have the honor and privilege to speak with you? And one thing that for years I've been working on, and continuously as things change in life, continue to work on that negative self-talk. So when that thought pops in my head, I do that. I don't literally smack myself in the face, but I kind of have that proverbial, right? Like, stop. See that big stop. 1, 2, 3. This is going to be good. This is going to be great. I mean, great hands. I have experiences. We all have experiences to share and talk to other people about and with, and there's value there, right? Because no matter how many times you hear something, it could take the 100th time. It doesn't matter who says it. It could take that 100th or 1,000th time for you to hear it, for it to just click, in your head, and that sense of peace and clarity, realization, right? So I wanted to share some of that, while we're talking about being smacked in the face by certain things and life, the journey of life, right? We're talking about that. And how can we create that journey in a more favorable way, more enjoyable way, a way that at the end of the day, we could be like, I'm happy. Today was a great day. Why was it great? Well, I woke up, for starters, right? You said, who knows if who knows when it's their last day? We don't. So starting off saying, I'm grateful to have another day. And now some days suck. You're just not in the mood, right? And you could sit with that. And some days you go for it. Some days sit with that, hit that snooze button. But most days I hope that people can say, you know what, that's the negative self-talk. Let's say stop. 1, 2, 3, say something good that I'm going to accomplish today, or say something good that you feel about yourself, and dictate your day, your life, because we have a huge amount of control and say in that. So I just had to go on that tangent a bit because you know,
No,
like,
this whole conversation is just going to be a rolling tangent. It's all good.
I love when words come out of your mouth. My stream of consciousness goes racing. So I'm gonna let you speak a bit more.
Well, so when I think about mindset,
Yeah.
right, I think you hit gratitude, which I think is absolutely crucial to have. And there are times when, like, I'll share with you, like, I'm not grateful about some of those things. Like, I can see what I don't have, or what I want, or I can even let envy get into places at times. And I promise you, I'm going to say something that I haven't ever said on a podcast before, I don't think. So I started this journey of being self-employed when I decided to resign from what I would consider my dream job. And it took me about a year to, like, bounce back from that, because I was kind of dabbling, trying to figure out, can I do this? Because I had all of those doubts, all those fears, all those limits, all the imposter syndrome was there.
Yeah.
And I was shaken. And I don't think I realized that until later. Like, I was like, okay, I feel relief. Everything is good. But I had little direction, and gratitude became a huge piece of that. I started to, like, I'm a man, like, I have strong faith, and I know you do too. But the gratitude, and then the mindset, the decision to choose each day to be joyful.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to say that I haven't shared, that from 2016, 17, 18, and 19, somewhere into that range, what I'm doing right now to build a business from scratch in the space that I'm doing is incredibly hard. And I think it's also like some limits that I have in my own brain to get out of the way. Here's what I'm going to say. I wanted to quit 1,000, if not 10,000 times. And that meant multiple times a day. Guarantee you. I hit some really, really low spots because bank accounts don't lie, right? And you're working your tail off, and you're not seeing the returns, and you're burning through cash. The safety net goes away. And now I'm faced with, what do I do? Like, do I give up on this? And if I give up on this today, am I going to regret that moment 5 years later? I know I am. So all I can do is, like you talked about, your company has grit and integrity. I'm sorry, grit. And then the way you said integrity, which was magnifying the word grit there. Like, you have to press forward. You've got to continue to move forward. Now, I'm going to say this: in 2020, when everything came off the tracks, 2020 was going to be a breakout year. And in one day, I'm getting email notifications, I'm getting phone calls, the speaking engagement we're having to cancel. I totally understand. I'm gracious about those things, but it's like, whoa. I doubled down that year. And at the end of 2020, what I did is I doubled down on training and investing in my own growth and systems. That was a choice. That was a mindset, because everything was pointing back to fear. You're going to screw it up. You're going to go bankrupt potentially. Like, the worst things start to materialize in your brain. At the end of 2020, I was in a networking group, and I was just invited to share something. And I said, guys, I just had a revelation this morning in this group that I wanted to quit 1,000 or 10,000 times over the last several years, but not once in 2020, not once when it was the hardest year did I ever want to quit. And now, like, that's been a catapult. That's mindset. That's so that to me is what you were bringing out. Like, this is the stuff that you feed me that makes me want to, like, share those things. So Mitchell, thank you. Like, that's fun. It's fun to share it.
And thank you, because, when you share these struggles, Gary Vaynerchuk, one of his videos is he just says, document, right? I don't know the exact quote, but he says, document the journey, or whatever the words are. And that's so important, because people who become successful, right? Most people don't look at them and be like, oh, but they struggled so much. Like, they just see they're successful, and they don't think of the step and thought they had to challenge and thought they had to fight and push, right? All these negative internal dialogue that comes. Most people don't think, oh, but they had these challenges, right? They just see how they are successful. And you're sharing the journey right now, right? You're sharing what you went through, right? And everyone has their different challenges that happen. And I can guarantee that that wasn't the only challenge, the business, right? So much the past year plus has been a challenge on everyone's way of thinking, everyone's way of life. And so for you to share just one component of the challenge that you went through, right? That's the journey.
Yeah.
And the journey is so important. And I thank you for sharing the journey, because it makes people who do eventually get to whatever that somewhere is, their vision, more real, right? You're not a mythical creature of sorts. You're someone who went through it. You put the work in. How does it happen? Well, look at my posts on LinkedIn for years and years. Look at the number of podcasts I put. Look at the number of engagement I did. I intentionally wanted to put out the things that you're putting out, right? Like you intentionally put out the values that you want to share and the way people can live those values, not just talk about it, right?
Right.
Don't just talk about it, walk it too, right? Be real about it. Not like you talk about it, but actualize it. So important, so important. So when you share more of the steps like you're sharing, it makes it more real. It makes it more relatable, understandable, and it can motivate a lot of people to hear those parts. Absolutely.
You are an amazingly positive person, and I love being around positive people.
Thank you.
Yeah. So talk to me, like, how is that a mindset? Is that one of your strengths? Why are you like, what makes you wired to be such a positive person? Like what do you get from it? What makes it so prominent?
That is a journey, right? So how do you become positive? I wasn't always positive, right? It was literally, again, as I mentioned, in my teenage years, I had anxiety, different bouts of depression. And during those times, I can remember when I was early teenage years, my mom would take my brothers and I to Barnes and Nobles, and I would go to the self-help section. Here you have like a 10, 11, or 12-year-old going to the self-help section, getting books on psychology and stuff like that. And not only that, going on YouTube and searching motivation, inspiration, and listening to you mentioned Les Brown. Yeah, I've listened to him so many times. I love that bit he talks about when he gets in his first gig as a disc jockey.
Yes, it's a great bit.
Oh man, how he even got a chance to work there, right? He went to the guy every morning as like, just want to see, maybe this happened, maybe this, so listening to him over hundreds of hours, listening to people like Tony Robbins, being fortunate to go to one of Tony Robbins's his conferences, listening to people like Jim Rohn, right? So again, going to what content are you feeding your mind? And that is how I've been able to gain this type of positivity, because again, we have a choice, and there have been too many times that I've allowed the negative self-talk to take the wheel, and I'm trying to allow my optimism, positivity take that wheel more, and understanding how does mindfulness play a role in that, right? And understanding how do you change habits, how do you change routines, how do you do these things? And yeah, I'd like to think that overall, throughout the day, I'm much more positive than negative, but I'm a person, and some days I'm not having it.
Yeah.
And that's normal, and that's okay, and that's important. One of the things that we spoke about the other week, I'm going to just pull it up right here. When you talk about DISC, model, and talking about different behaviors and different people's personalities, I think it's really important for me to mention that I really try to be mindful of who I'm speaking with. And right now I'm speaking with an incredible James Mayhew. Oh man, I get pumped when I say your name. And your energy is I feel like you're a safe space. You're a space that allows it, that appreciates it, that values it, but not everyone does. So when we talked about DISC behaviors and different personalities, it's important to be self-aware and know when you have to tweak that down a little bit. So right now I know it's good, but I'm bringing it down a little bit to say that sometimes that's not for everyone. So this episode might be like someone's listening and be like, nah, forget it. Because this is too much for me. And that's okay. In the transition of my job recently, I was very fortunate to have a lot of my colleagues share some really nice things about me. And one of the things that came up a lot was, Mitch, when I first met you, I thought you were so fake.
Mm.
The way you said hello, I thought, is there something wrong? They said to me, they thought there was something wrong with them, the way I said hello with the optimism and the positivity. And they realized over time, day after day, after a few months, they're like, you know what? I think he's real. I think this is genuinely who this person is. And so it's just interesting. But what I wanted to bring up, I wanted you to tell everyone what was your analogy with the clock on the disc. I love this. I love this. If you can share it, if you haven't already in the past, share it again.
Yeah, no, I can. It was, I was retelling a story that a client had shared with me
Yeah.
who was in a company, and he was invited into the executive room to share a piece of, a project or something like that. And he went into the room, and he was kind of marveling at his ability to communicate what he thought everybody was saying, and he lacked some awareness on reading the people in the room. So he came out feeling on cloud nine. I've delivered, it's an awesome thing. His boss came to him and said, I got to change the name. I'm just gonna say Bill. Okay, Bill, what were you doing in that room today? And Bill was like, it was great. What do you think? He's like, Bill, we asked you what time it was, and you told us how to build a clock. It was a huge miss because Bill came in trying to be something he wasn't. He wanted to impress. He wasn't there to be like, he didn't stay in his lane. Like that day, his job was to come in and just be kind of succinct. This is the piece that we're working on. And he came in with a lack of awareness, a lack of humility, honestly. And this was what he was admitting to me. And I was like, I am going to put that in my pocket, because there's a lot of like that. We can all relate to that. I've made that mistake before. I've come in trying to create a posture of something other than what it is. And it's like, we need to get that level of feedback. And sometimes feedback, this is why people get weirded out by feedback, is because it can hurt. It can be painful, but it's also necessary to our development, to our growth.
I love that story. I absolutely love it, because when we're talking about messaging and intentions and how it gets across, how it's received, self-awareness is so important. And you just mentioned feedback, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My thoughts on feedback go like this. A lot of, interestingly, recently I've had a few people said, are you open to feedback? Right? So to even have someone ask me, are you open to some feedback right now, was incredible. Because if you're not open to the feedback, then it's not a good time to say it, because feedback is often going to be sometimes critical, right? Constructive criticism. Can I give you some constructive criticism on that?
Yeah.
Even though you're saying constructive criticism, how is it going to be received? And so what I tell my colleagues or friends is, I know you, and I want you to share these things with me, because I know you're coming from a loving place, a place where you want to see me grow, develop, and become better than the current version that I am. Oh, wow. I love that. Right. So if we're able to appreciate and recognize when that feedback's coming, but also internalize and recognize sometimes people don't want that feedback. So if we're ever going to give someone constructive criticism, we need to be careful how we say that and present to be like, I like you. I like you. I'm more than just like, I love you. I care for your development. I care for your growth. I have a few thoughts I want to share with you. Are you open to it now? If not, not a problem. Because I know timing is so important on these things too, not just the messages, but the timing and the intention. It's so many things that come together.
Check this out. I got to share this, because I agree with everything that you just said. And I think the key was, somebody asked you, is this a good time? They're asking for permission. Now, there are times, however, because I'm working with leaders primarily, when the leader has to just give it, right? So I do a training called Accelerate, and this is module 3, giving and receiving feedback. And at the end of that, like every module ends up, you have a cheat sheet. Here's the cheat sheet. Here's how to enter into this. And so there's it's a kind of a matrix. And so on the top row, it's a four boxes, right? So you draw a square, slice it into quarters. The top row is developmental style of feedback. So that's collaborative and investigative. The bottom row is like, this is directive style feedback. This is corrective or informative, meaning, how do we prevent this from happening again? What went wrong? Or, Mitchell, I need to let you know something that you're coming across not genuine, or, you know, whatever it might be. You came across this way, you thought you were doing this, I need to let you know. So that's two different styles, but four different methods to approach giving feedback with somebody. But the best companies have a culture of feedback where it's normalized, that it's not only at the annual review, or it's only when not somebody screwed up. The best companies do it because they've taught people that feedback is also recognizing and appreciation of greatness. And we teach people, like in this training, I teach people, let the win be the win. Like, there's so many times we just overdo it. So like, I just wanted to share that because you start in the middle of that box, you go, you got to think with the end in mind. What am I trying to accomplish here? Then that kind of drives the urgency and the tone of the meeting. You got to establish those things. And there's times when it's perfectly acceptable to say, can I give you, is this a good time? And then there's times that the leader basically has to say, hey, I need to do this with you right now. Like, because it needs to be immediate. It shouldn't happen 3 weeks later or 6 months later.
And the day-to-day interactions you have with people dictate and allow those shifts, because they'll know who are you at the core. And then, so every once in a while, if something happens where they might be shorter or quicker to the point, hopefully that person says, you know what, I hope that person's okay, or hope whatever their situation is good, and know that it's not about necessarily them. Sometimes they might have to look inward and work on something. Other times it's not always about them. But these are important things. And when you were just talking about recognizing, sorry about that. When you were just talking about recognizing and celebrating, that reminds me, you know, when we spoke, I think you said, you know, about a year ago, this is our first conversation. I took a lot of notes.
Oh my goodness, look at that. That's awesome.
Oh, that's just page one. I've got another page or two. And you were just talking, and it reminded me, it's amazing what things the mind remembers, isn't it? It reminded me, I'm like, there's definitely something I wrote down from our conversation a year ago. And I just turned the back of the page, and I'm like, here it is. Recognize the good and be specific when you do. Tie it back to a company value. And like, when you said that just, it stuck out to me. I had to write it down. And that, recognize the good, going back to something you mentioned earlier, how do we celebrate it, right? We have to celebrate the small things. If we only celebrate the big things, we're missing out, right? Going again, we don't know when's our last day. So live in the moment, right? Mindfulness. Try to practice that more. You know, for those watching the video, this device right here, right? The phone, technology, it takes us away from the present moment. There's some beautiful things about a phone, absolutely. But I think on an overall scale, I think we need to detach us from it a bit more, put that phone away, separate, and be more in the moment. Celebrate those small things, those small moments. Oh man, this is good stuff.
Mitchell, you're a young person to me. All right. You're 20 years younger than me, roughly. I'm guessing in there. What I just want to say here is that it's really, it's encouraging, it's uplifting, it's inspiring to me when I meet young people that understand this stuff at such a high level, because just tell you straight up, at your age, I know I couldn't have communicated it that way. I think there were certain things that I recognized, but I wasn't around this stuff enough. I was at that time I would have been I've always been kind of a solopreneur, entrepreneur. So at your time I was probably in photography, actually. We're moving out of photography into design work and print shop, and you know, that's my background, which is crazy to see now that it led me to what I do now. But you have a coaching mindset. I think I remember telling you that before. You have a coaching mindset, you have a development mindset, and you bring out the best in people. And I promise you, the more that you continue to do that, it's going to help your career get wherever it wants to go. Right. That's a zig thing, right? The more people you help get what they want, you get what you want, you know? Yeah. And honestly, here's the thing.
And that's where I feel alive, by the way. That's where I feel alive. Like, I feel alive when I'm in a position where I could speak to someone who feels a little bit stuck, or like, oh man, I you know, I'm doing a lot of phone calls these days, and someone's like, it was just a bad call. And I said, that's just one call. You know, I get on the phone with them for 5 minutes, and I I take over for a little bit and just start saying, you're doing amazing, because they are. They're doing something like, and just focusing on that. And that's where I feel alive, and I feel it's a place that I enjoy. And so, yeah, I do see sometime, in my life, that's somewhere I want to go. And I learn, you got to learn. And the more you learn, the more you feel more confident and able to do that. I think it's the journey, but continue. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, this is so good. Right. You just reminded me of something I wanted to point out. A few minutes ago, you were talking about when you meet somebody and they can be, skeptical of your energy, your optimism, your positivity because of the way you say hi to them. And then they spend time with you and they realize, man, this is how he is. This is good. This is how, but so, here's the thing. People feel that way because it is uncommon. It's rare. And just imagine how much more if we could get people to, I don't know, step out of the discomfort that they have or the pain. How many times people are in some sort of pain or crisis, whether it's relational, financial, spiritual, health. There's so many different ways that we could be in some form of crisis, right?
Absolutely.
You talked about the mindset. And when you can be that person that just brings life into a room and like an inner light kind of radiates from you through your words and the way you treat people, it's uncommon. And those are people that are either hurt or maybe they're just wired to be a little skeptical of it. Like, to be fully honest with you, there's times when I meet people like that, I'm like, okay, I want to see it over and over, right? I need to know that it's actually real. So I don't want to feel like I'm being taken advantage of or being manipulated, because
Absolutely.
we all have. And so like, that's such a huge thing is when you meet people, you get invested in who they are, and you're not trying to do anything more than just be curious about them and get to know them. You do that so well.
Thank you. And it goes to, how do you want to live your life? And there's so much that you could do. And again, going to culture, right? Talking about culture, talking about values, and what you surround yourself with affects your inner well-being and your mindset and stuff. So to me, I like to be involved in creating, the feng shui,
Right.
like what ways can we uplift the atmosphere that we're working, the people that we're interacting with on a daily basis, to the point where, work doesn't have to be something that I have to do, right? I have to go to work today.
Right.
I have to do this. I have to do that. And we all naturally feel that way at times. But sometimes if you're able to, if you're in an environment that allows it, that appreciates it, that lets it grow and be cultivated, then I get to go to work and be with these great people. And then I get to go home, and whoever you have at home, spend time with them. And so, again, we have a significant amount of say in how our lives are lived. There are people who, that will interact with that. We shouldn't try to change people, right? If they're open to it, we'll see that opportunity if we're aware of it, self-aware and emotionally, and working on our emotional intelligence, constantly challenging the self in a way that becomes more open-minded and looking at the other person, and includes, well, what might their perspective or experience be at this point in time, and really incorporating that in how we then interact with them.
When I say, now you get my mind rolling on things, but there was something that you said at the beginning, which was the power of one question. Talk to me, because when we start down that path of the power of one question, what's your experience?
Oh man.
Are you asking the question, or are you being asked the question? Let's start there.
I'm typically the one asking the question.
Yeah.
That's typically been me. So important. I read a while ago, like, how do you get more comfortable asking one more question, or just that topic. And it was like, if you're on an airplane, and on that airplane, they give you a cup and put the soda in the cup, but you want the can, be like, hey, excuse me, can I please have the can? What's the worst that can happen? They'll say no. What, they're not going to give you the can of soda? Like,
right.
And then what? If they don't, okay, so no. So that really cultivated my mindset of like, let me start working on the power questions. Let me learn more about questions. asking questions, getting more comfortable in questions. And right now I'm thinking two ways of going with continuing with this. One is, I'm going to go this way. How do people get more comfortable and challenging themselves and finding comfort in discomfort? And the answer that I've found and through personal experience has been true is by putting yourself in those situations, right? That image of, here's the circle, you're in the circle, that's where you are, and outside of the circle is where the magic happens, right? So when I was in college, undergrad, one of my first classes, I was terrified. I wouldn't speak up, but I said to myself that I got to change that. And how did I change that? I challenged myself every single class to ask at least one question, even if it was, can you please repeat that? And over time, over a few years, I became the person my colleagues went to and be like, yeah, Mitch, you do the presentation, you do it. So that was one thing. Another thing that I wanted to say was a book by Brian Grazer. Brian Grazer is a Hollywood movie producer. He has a book, The Curious Mind. And his story is so fascinating to me. And how it was through questions that he got to where he is. He didn't seek being a Hollywood movie producer. I mean, he was in the right place at the right time, and then went and challenged things and asked simple questions to the point where the curious mind. I love that's the name of his book. He has two. And so asking those questions, if you don't ask, you don't know, you can't learn, you can't grow. And anyway, questions are powerful. How, again, the intention of the question, how we word it, can you tell me more about that? Or why did you do that? Right? So different. Different.
It's a great point. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. So like, from a coaching standpoint, this is, I had to be trained. I had to develop a skill to do this. I've always had a curiosity. So I think that's kind of what drove me to the place where I'm at is like, I'm interested in you. What makes you tick? And why are you the way you are? And I want to celebrate that with you. So the power of a question is this. Anytime that that I'm working with a client, and if I lead with the why question, what happens? I put people like on their heels. They're in a defense mode, right?
Defensive.
Yeah. Why didn't you get this done, Mitchell? What if I actually tweak that? And
which it can be tweaked in so many ways.
Well, it's just a simple way to do it is to say, oh, so you didn't get that done. Okay. What came up that you didn't expect, right? I'm going to assume positive intent, not negative intent. And even if I assume positive intent, but I lead with the why question, you may think improperly or incorrectly that I'm assuming negative intent. You're backpedaling. So now we're going to lead with what's and how's before we get to the whys. The why still needs to happen.
Right.
But if I come in there and I say, okay, the question is what got in the way that you didn't expect on that is, and you come back and you start to explain, well, actually a manager from another department pulled me into a project. They told me it was really urgent, right, and I helped them. Oh, okay. Well, how can we prevent that from happening again? So now, see, I want to give that back to you rather than me telling you, don't ever do that again. Mitchell, when I give you that task, I expect you to get it. No, that's command and control. Now, what I want to be able to work with, whether I am in a manager-employee relationship or when I'm teaching leadership to business clients, is we want to get it into a spot that we have to understand most people don't mean to go in and screw up. They don't mean to miss a deadline. They don't mean to miss the mark on something. And if I always lead that way as the manager, the boss, I am creating gaps. I'm creating mistrust. I'm creating doubt. I'm creating all the things that we've talked about earlier on this podcast that we're trying to avoid. So let's enter into it with like, okay, what context did I fail to set around that? What goals do like us as managers need to have so that, they don't come in and try and steal your employees' time? Like maybe we need to create some boundaries on that. And, but if I fail to set context, like Mitchell, this is a really huge project. We need to have this done by Thursday at 4. It has to be done by Thursday at 4. And here's why. Yeah. Like that's where we want to go with it.
Yeah. So that what you just said brought a lot of things to my mind. And it wraps, the theme of our conversation that we've always have is always human development,
Yes.
positive approach. I love it. I love it. So a lot of things that you just said, right, rang at a few different points in our conversation. Benefit of the doubt, giving people the benefit of the doubt, right? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, whatever.
Right.
There's some reality to giving people the benefit of the doubt, but in general, we should try to be a little bit more, in that mindset. And the way we lead, right? The way, what you were just saying is, what's the context? How are we approaching people? And if we can go and lead in a more uplifting, more inspiring way, right? And tapping into the passion of other people, that wouldn't just be beneficial for you, but it's beneficial for the employee, it's beneficial for the culture, it's beneficial for the team, right? It's looking at these things like, you want to retain employees, you want employee retention, which a lot of people have issues with. Well, what are your values and how are you getting them across to other people? How are you leading? Right? So when you're talking about, what questions are you asking them? Another question could be, was there something about this project that I might have been able to put in place to allow it to have been more accessible to reach? Or that's just one that pops in my head. Obviously, you could tweak that in so many different ways, but saying, what support does your department need, or do you need in this company to excel at these big projects?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, what energy, what route we choose to take doesn't affect only our lives, but the people around us as well. And so, yeah, it's just,
This, what you're talking about right now, to be in a role that you're in, to understand these things is so important. It is obvious that you studied this and that you have invested in learning these things, because I will routinely work with people that are in leadership roles that may have been in leadership roles for decades, even, that don't understand the principles you just talked about. And here's why: they lead the way they were led and they never try to grow. Like, they just don't know. They're too busy trying to respond to fires that need to be put out. They're too busy being busy, right? And so they don't invest in their growth, and they leave all of this on the table. And here, if you think about leadership as, like, I saw an illustration visually done on stage once, I thought it was brilliant. The presenter brought a step ladder onto the stage and showed that on this step, these are different levels in leadership. Now, if we have a leader that's on step 3 that is not growing, we've put them in there, we don't develop that person, she's not grown, she hasn't learned this, or maybe there's insecurity along with the inexperience, maybe there's even immaturity involved. Those are 3 I words that are so huge: insecurity, immaturity, and inexperience. If we have them at the 3rd step, but there's people that are under them that have the potential to go to the 4th step or the 5th step, if we have somebody who's insecure on the 3rd step, they're going to not develop them. They're going to restrict them because they're worried that they won't have an opportunity. What happens then if they eclipse me? That's supposed to be my next thing. What we need to have is self-awareness. We need to have self-confidence. We need to have leaders that are continually growing. Coming back to what I was saying, 40, 50, 60-year-old people that have not learned stuff that you already know. I run into this a lot. So this is Mitchell Harris's opportunity, right? Don't lose this. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking these things like, so what do you do with it? Well, I'm going to toss that back to you. What do you do with it? What can you, Mitchell, what comes to mind for you to, like, help your company, or help somebody else that's maybe outside your company? This is a colleague that you have, or maybe it's in a place that you volunteer. How do you help teach what you know?
great question. I first want to go back, is something that you've been saying, what are the intentions of the people we're working with, right? And are we giving them the benefit of the doubt? And then how do we incorporate how we want it to change? So when we give those messages and not giving them in a negative way, like, well, why didn't you do that? Right? Being more focused, right? So what's the difference? What's the tweak in this? It's the mindset of being more solution and goal oriented. And if the goal is to have that person grow in your company and have projects done better and keep them, then, well, how you approach that, you'll think about it differently. And so now going to your last question, how does someone change their mindset? Well, I think where it starts is, where we also say to kind of avoid, but going back to that phone, going back to that internet, going back to these social medias, and taking a look at, well, who am I currently following? Let me go through today and see, you know what? Here's a person. I see they posted this. typically, because we're connected with so many people on these social media apps and devices, websites, and you don't have to follow everyone. Just because you interacted with someone once at a party 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or it was a colleague, most of the time we're not interacting with it anyway. So if you click unfollow, and then you intentionally choose who to follow, so that you're putting specific type of content in front of you, right? What books are you reading? What TV shows are you watching? What language are you using? It's a process. This thing doesn't, these types of things don't happen overnight. They don't happen. You don't just close your eyes, wake up, and boom, you're a different person.
Yeah.
Well, you are, right? If you intentionally make the change incremental, don't take a huge chunk. You got to do small steps every day, and that 1% shift over time becomes huge.
It's huge. Such a
Yeah.
great point. And you mentioned like what things are you watching, right? Here's what I've run into before is, and I started to build training around busyness, and I realized that people that are overly busy, they don't want this, or the fact that they're misguided about time. Okay, they don't want this. What they wanted to see was how they could accelerate. That's why I changed the name of the program. It was the same kind of training, but people here get too busy and they'll say things like, "I didn't have time to get that done.
Yeah.
I'm too busy." Those are like the two main excuses that you would hear.
Right.
But then they would share maybe on social media that they binge watched something on Netflix all weekend or in the evening, right?
Guilty.
And listen,
Guilty.
I'm not, listen, we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's wrong to do that.
Right.
However, if you're going to use that as an excuse, and then you're going to complain about your lack of growth, your lack of development, and you're not taking ownership of your life and the direction of which it is going, and you want to blame it on Netflix or binge watching, or you're not, like, that's the first thing I guess I would blame it on. It's like, hey, if you want to get serious about it, take ownership of that and let's cut this out.
Absolutely. For everything we say, there's the counter, right? Everything we say, someone could play the devil's advocate, and it could be your internal dialogue being that the alternative, or it can be an actual person in front of you. So again, the intentional choices we make, and how we try to, again, focus on the positive, focus on how can we make it better, right? Because it doesn't feel good to be in pain or in discomfort, right? But sometimes you have to be in that situation, that discomfort, that pain, to grow, right? So we also have to recognize that that's an important thing, right? Also recognizing that growth isn't always comfortable, right? You have to make some, it's easier, going back, it's easier to sit down and watch TV than to do some of these other self-development things temporarily.
Yeah.
In this moment, it's easier. Down the road, might not be as easier, right? It might make things down the road more difficult, right? So how do you do these shifts? It's you don't just completely go cold turkey, right? You don't just stop completely. Some people, maybe they can, but I'd challenge anyone listening, if you have any of these, relate to the things we're talking about, see if you could sit down with yourself for 10 minutes, no phone, no music, no TV, just in silence. And don't you think, if that's a challenge, which it is for me still, I mean, I try to do that, right? There's something interesting about that. Why can't we sit for a few minutes with your thoughts will race, that's okay. That's natural, that will happen. But why is it so difficult to sit still? I don't know. I mean, we could get on that. Could be another 30, 45 or more hours.
Oh yeah, we can do this all day.
But yeah, absolutely. But that's the challenge, right? If there's a challenge, the things we're talking about, if you're like, no, I'm good. I don't mind watching 3 hours of TV a day, and I don't mind not developing. Okay, fine. That's okay. I'm not going to change you. We're not going to change you. It has to come from yourself. But a simple test, I think, would be that 5-10 minute sit down, see how that experience is, and to recognize that whatever you're going through, bad, good, or other, it could be better if you want it to be. And it's not going to always, just by saying it could be better, it's not going to be better like this, right? It took you went through those struggles, the thousands upon thousands of times you said, I should quit, I should stop, I shouldn't keep pursuing leadership through values. right? The unbusy leader topic, right? But you didn't. You stuck through it, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm sure thousands upon thousands of people, if they're not grateful for it yet, they will be soon, because they're going to discover you. The people who haven't discovered you, they're on their way.
And listen, right back at you, because people who haven't heard you speak before, did you say this was your first podcast?
Yeah, I got so hyped about this.
Dude, this
Thank
is
you
awesome.
so much.
Like, you're a rock star. It's going to happen. People are going to hear it, and they're going to want to interview Mitchell Dean Harris because they hear what you have to say. They see the value and they want to be part of that. Like, this is the cool thing. So as we wind down here, now you're based in New York City, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously I'm in Iowa, so geographic boundaries don't really matter a whole lot anymore in this day and age because of phone and Zoom and whatever conferencing you like to use.
Right.
But how can people get a hold of you, and what might they want to get a hold of you about? Like, this is your opportunity to talk a little bit about what your job is and put a little plug in for that. I want you to be able to share, so people that are connecting with what your message has been maybe want to go like, ooh, like, I really like who he is as a person. What does he have? Oh, he's got a service that I need. So let us know.
Okay, cool. So, when it comes to the positive messaging, I'm there. You said my name a few times, Mitchell Dean Harris, and that's how you find me on social media. MITCHELLDEANHARRIS. Find me on LinkedIn, and I like to share the positivity through my posts, experiences. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is so powerful. That's a conversation that could be another time.
Right.
If used properly. Who are you following? And what I'm currently doing is I'm working for a company called JustWorks, and it's an incredible company. What they do, their goal, they're designed in a way to make it that small to mid-sized businesses can thrive and focus on what matters to them. What's their mission? How can they not get stuck in the busy work of HR, payroll, compliance, and benefits that could take hours and hours each week? So this company is tech forward, won awards for their incredible 24/7 customer service, right? And more. I'm just so grateful. The values that they hold are incredible. I'm just going to read a quote that was mentioned in our meeting yesterday. We are at our best, and we are helping others to become their best. You hear that? This is a value. This is a message that we're spending time during a meeting where there's over 500 employees together talking about at our best when we're helping others be at their best. I mean, that is a value I am proud to work for, and others. So JustWorks, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. My email is mitchelldeanharris@gmail.com. That's my personal email. And would love to hear any thoughts, comments, or questions. One thing that I like to do is if someone sends me a message, I respond. So, it's one of my pet peeves, and I will continue to be doing that for as long as I possibly can, because the value of connection is important to me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about that. And I love your questions. You said how great, I may have done this time, but for my first podcast, but let me tell you, I'm only as great as the person I'm with, right? You gave me you made it so comfortable. It's so easy and comfortable to speak with you. The values you hold that come right through. Thank you for this opportunity. And
you're welcome.
Awesome. I'm so excited for more conversations.
Oh, this does it. Yeah, we're going to do more. I promise you that. And it might be more podcasts too. So I'll put those links to your company, your email, those things in our show notes. And I just wanted to thank you again for being a guest. I had so much fun. Many of these times when we say this, and I truly mean this, so it's never lip service, is I think that we could have podcasted or carried this conversation on for another hour or two until we're like mentally exhausted, right? So
you energize me. Your topics and what you have to share energizes me. So I could have, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being the guest, and man, best of luck to all, everything that you're doing and raising that beautiful family that you've got.